Hello everybody, this is AK. I'm back. So, in the last two videos that I produced, I talk about how things are not in a good place and how things could be bad in an environment where interest rates are staying higher for longer, and how things could actually be a lot worse than we think, right? Even for those of us who are prepared for how things could go bad. Of course, there are people who are not convinced of this, and that's okay, because my aim is not to convince anyone, right, to swing anyone to my way of thinking, right? My aim is to remind myself that hard times could be upon us. But in Singapore, many of us don't feel it. We don't feel a lot of the problems that the rest of the world is feeling. It is like having a security blanket in Singapore, right? So many people I know think that Singapore is a heavenly place, and a Chinese friend told me that 新加坡是块风水宝地. Singapore has good feng shui, and it's a prosperous land, is a valuable piece of land. Well, it's not so much feng shui. I think we have a capable and efficient system to deal with many problems, thanks to what our founding fathers did for the country, right? So, but this is a false sense of security, because I've said before many times, Singapore is a small and open economy, and having a security blanket, given enough time, even the most ignorant of us would soon find out that the security blanket isn't effective in keeping us secure in reality, right? When shit hits the fan, we are going to feel it, right? So some things must be said, and I'll just say it, right? But if you're not convinced, that's okay, right? Like I say, I'm not here to convince anyone. But think about this. The Fed has said again that interest rates are likely to stay higher for longer, and having interest rates higher for longer has consequences. Yes, consequences. And in the last two videos, we talked about some of the consequences for bondholders, for investors in equities, right? We already talked about those consequences. And now we want to talk about another consequence, and that is the housing market, right? We talk about how higher interest rates means risk assets have to be repriced lower, and property is a risk asset. Yes, even the home that we're staying in is considered a risk asset, because if we were to rent it out, for example, right, then it has to be considered an investment, a risk asset, right? And for most of us, the biggest asset we hold is our home. And for most of us, we have a housing loan, and it is probably our largest liability. Yes, a home is a liability unless it's fully paid. I've said this many times, and it's already in the news. Writing was on the wall as early as July this year, when at the beginning of July, the news says that Singapore home prices fell 0.4% in the first quarter. So there's a first quarterly drop in 3 years. So then at the end of July, it was said that price momentum was finally easing after a buoyant run that saw Singapore's red-hot property market defy a global slowdown. So globally, the property market was slowing down, and in some countries, the prices crashed. Like, for example, in Australia, the prices came down. In China, the property sector crashed, right? But Singapore was still doing relatively well, and finally, in July, things started to weaken. Prices started to decline, right? In first quarter and second quarter. So for 6 months now, prices have been in decline. That's why in an interview with the fifth person recently, I said property prices, property sector, the market is cyclical. So if young people are thinking of buying a home, there's no rush. There's no rush. Why should we rush into buying a home? And then could we wait for better prices? And in the meantime, we build up a stronger financial foundation. I don't think that's a bad idea. But of course, I said I'm not here to tell you how to live your life, right? So if we consider how home prices could weaken next year because the buying momentum has slowed down, prices are coming down. And people say, oh, prices are coming down, quickly buy. Well, usually these things have momentum. If it starts coming down, it could go down for a while more, right? Especially in an environment where interest rates would stay higher for longer. And in the last video, I talked about how interest rates could actually go up even higher and not just staying high at the current level because of what could happen in the Bank of Japan if they decide to start tightening, which seems quite likely. So if housing prices decline next year, then what happens is that the wealth effect would reduce. People are less likely to spend money freely. And in an event where we have a recession that affects Singapore as well, and like I say, if there's a credit crisis, credit become less readily available, credit being the lifeblood of businesses and by extension employment, and people lose their jobs. Our home is a very illiquid asset. Very unlikely we can sell it easily, and it's also very unlikely that we would want to sell it because we still need a place to stay. So the more liquid assets would get disposed of first, and we know stocks are very easily disposed of, right? No money, sell our stocks first. We need the money, right? And this could exert the pressure on the stock market, right? In the most bearish scenario I can think of, where property prices come down very badly and there is a recession and people become unemployed, this would happen. And we've seen this happening in the past before, right? Those of us who are older, lao lang like AK, right, and older would remember, right, how all this played out before. Of course, people in their 20s might not remember or might not have any experience of such a scenario. Okay, it's just a hard truth. And in an earlier video, I shared that right now there should be more people suffering from mortgage stress, right? And in result of a survey done by OCBC, they found that in 2022, 40% of Singaporeans were experiencing mortgage stress. And this was an increase from 2021's number of 31%. And they say they were worried because a percentage of Singaporeans who feel that they are not able to pay off their monthly installment is the highest it has been for the last 4 years, right? So more and more Singaporeans feel that they are not able to pay off their monthly installments. So fortunately, I'm sure most Singaporeans are prudent enough to set aside some money, savings, and they are probably dipping into their savings to service these monthly mortgages. And if interest rates stay higher for longer, they will have to keep doing this for a longer time, right? So even those of us who have an emergency fund, and if we are in such a situation and we've been dipping into it to pay interest expense, rising interest expense, it is very stressful because that emergency fund could soon run out. And if there should be a recession and some people get unemployed, the situation will be a lot worse. Right? So the more marginal home buyers will be hit the worst. What's the key takeaway of this video? Don't do what people tell us to do when they say you can afford it if you take a loan, right? Always think of safety nets. Know ourselves know our circumstances. We might make some bad financial decisions from time to time, but if they are not crippling, they are not too bad. The ones that do cripple us are usually larger and longer term financial commitments made without consideration of what could go wrong. And buying a home is a large and long-term financial commitment. So don't be too optimistic, right? Be pragmatic. If AK can talk to himself, so can you. Bye-bye.